Hi, I'm Dongsheng. Welcome to Digging into China, where we explore China in depth to reveal unique perspectives. Recently, after news surfaced that TikTok might be banned, a wave of so-called TikTok refugees flooded into Xiaohongshu, Chinese social media platform Little Red Book. Against this backdrop, Chinese social media saw a surge in China versus US comparison. According to Chinese media reports, many American users were surprised to realize that despite high wages in the US, the steep cost of living puts them under significant financial strain, so much so that in some aspects, their lives seem even harder than those of people in China. This discovery excited many Little Pink's nationalists, who eagerly took it as proof that life in the West, particularly in the US, is far from ideal. However, if you take a closer look at this China versus US comparison phenomenon, you will find that it follows the CCP's long-standing patterns of misinformation. What exactly does this pattern entail? In this video, I'll break it down by examining the China versus US comparison trend, shedding light on how the CCP distorts narratives. We'll also explore what this trend reveals about the national mindset behind it.
What do you mean that people in China work one job and they don't even work 40 hours and they can easily afford their life? And then I'm over here working 60 hours a week, just me as a single parent, to barely make ends meet.
So how do I see this China versus US comparison? Simply put, it's a collection of misleading narratives. Some might argue, but aren't these statements made by Americans themselves? Didn't they post them on Chinese social media platforms like Xiaohongshu? How can this still be misinformation? Do you know America better than Americans? Are these people fake?
I just want to make this clear. If it's ever I have to pick the US or China, I'm picking China. If we go to war with China, I'm defecting to China. If they're like, oh, we're going to do a draft and you have to go fight, nope. Immediately giving all secrets to China. Loose lips sink ships, and I'm going to be sinking every US ship with my... China can have my data, China can have my passwords, China can have my secrets, China can know everything about me.
While some participants may be posing as Americans, many are indeed real, and some of what they say is factually correct. But the truth, when selectively edited and framed in a certain way, can easily be turned into misinformation. This is a textbook example of the CCP's disinformation tactics. Let's start with the first example, the misleading narrative. One of the most striking cases is the so-called hunger suppressant pill. The implication is clear. It suggests that some Americans are so poor they can't even afford food and have to rely on medication to suppress their hunger. At the first glance, this paints a bleak picture. Ordinary Americans struggling to eat, forced to take pills just to survive, as if poverty had turned them into science experiments. But does this hunger suppressant pill actually exist? It does, and it likely refers to Ozempic, a drug recently dubbed a miracle drug of the 21st century by economists. Ozempic does suppress appetite. It's remarkably effective, allowing users to eat just one meal a day without feeling hungry. But the key point is that this drug wasn't created to help impoverished Americans endure hunger. It's a weight loss medication. More importantly, Ozempic is a prescription drug and extremely expensive, costing about $1,000 per injection in the US, with a recommended dosage of 1 shot per month. The drug is also available in China at a slightly lower price, but it's still costly, with the cheapest version priced at 1,630 yuan per shot. This is the reality behind the so-called hunger suppressant pill. Now let's reconsider the logic behind this narrative. If someone told you that China has a hunger suppressant pill that costs 1,600 yuan per month and that migrant workers rely on it to save on food expenses, wouldn't you think they were delusional? When you really think about it, portraying Ozempic as a hunger-suppressant pill is akin to the old folk tale of peasants believing the emperor plows his field with a golden hoe. It's a complete misinterpretation of the reality. What is the real purpose of a drug that curbs hunger? Only the poor would fantasize about using it to cut down on food costs, while the wealthy see it as a tool for weight loss. After all, obesity is a problem of affluence, while hunger is a problem of poverty. This example illustrates a common tactic in misinformation, selectively omitting key details while exploiting common assumptions to mislead the audience. Does this so-called hunger suppressant pill exist? Yes, but its intended use has nothing to do with the claim that many impoverished Americans rely on injections to suppress hunger because they can't afford food. This pattern of deception appears throughout the China versus US comparison narrative, with painkillers being another prime example. The claim suggests that American households are filled with painkillers, implying that Americans either cannot afford medical treatment and rely on painkillers to cope, or that they are all heavily medicated. Is it true that many American households keep painkillers on hand? Absolutely, I do too. But does that indicate a crisis? Not at all. This argument preys on knowledge gaps and reinforces the Chinese stereotype that all medicine is inherently harmful. The painkiller in question is primarily Tylenol, known as generically as acetaminophen. It's a common remedy for colds, menstrual pain, and minor injuries, widely used worldwide with minimal side effects and no significant risk of addiction. However, in China, the belief that medicine is always somewhat toxic makes many people unnecessarily wary. Ironically, acetaminophen is also the main ingredient in many popular Chinese cold medicines, including 999 cold remedy and VC Yin Chow tablets. This misinformation strategy mirrors the hunger suppressant pill narrative. Start with a real fact, manipulate the context to create a misleading impression, and push a false conclusion. Beyond the distortion, another common technique in the China versus US comparison discourse is deliberately withholding key information, essentially telling only half the story. Another classic example of misleading narratives through omission is the claim that US military personnel have to rent their own housing, supposedly proving how dire their situation is. While it's true that the service members who choose to live off base must pay rent, but what's conveniently left out is that they receive a housing allowance, an amount that often exceeds the income of most Chinese citizens. Similarly, the claim about the lunch debt suggests that students in public schools can't afford lunch and must accumulate the debt until they can pay it off. While lunch debt exists, the key missing detail is that the US has a school meal assistance program. Low-income students who struggle to afford lunch can apply for subsidies, and in many cases, their debt is fully waived. This system is designed to prevent children from going hungry due to financial hardships. However, when these crucial facts are omitted, the narrative shifts into a bleak portrayal of American students suffering from hunger while schools and the government remain indifferent, leading many in China to believe that the kids in the US need loans just to eat. Beyond the distortion and omission, another common tactic is exaggerating rare cases as if they represent the norm. A prime example is the claim that Americans must work 2 jobs just to make ends meet. While some do, they are a small minority. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, only 5.3% of the workforce holds multiple jobs. Among them, 58% work 1 full-time and 1 part-time jobs, 24% work 2 part-time jobs, and just 4% held 2 full-time jobs, meaning only 0.2% of the entire U.S. workforce works 2 full-time jobs. Of course, no society is without poverty, and some individuals inevitably struggle. But through selective framing, this small minority is portrayed as the norm, as if most Americans endure grueling work schedules just to survive. This narrative is then contrasted with China's 996 work culture to falsely suggest that American workers have no labor rights either. Another example from the China-U.S. comparison chart is the claim that growing vegetables is illegal in the U.S. While it's true that there are rare instances where gardening might be regulated, the word illegal is an exaggeration. Homeowners Association, not the government, typically manage these rules. They may restrict vegetable gardening in some areas to maintain uniformity in landscaping. However, after being processed in the US-China comparison narrative, this uncommon regulation is inflated into a widespread law across the US. This manipulation leads to the false conclusion that, just like in China where land is state-owned, American land isn't truly owned by individuals either. After examining these tactics, it's clear that most of the claims in the comparison chart are fabricated. I won't go through every one of them due to space constrictions, but it's evident that distorting facts isn't enough on its own to create a successful narrative. The most crucial aspect is the control of information, erecting an internet wall within the existing Great Firewall. Instead of outright blocking foreign websites, this newer version of censorship selectively hides certain facts and reduces the reach of dissenting viewpoints. For example, in the case of American working two jobs, a US commenter on Xiaohongshu pointed out that working two jobs often still adds up to only 40 hours a week, which is comparable to a standard work week in China. This comment, however, only received a handful of likes. As a side note, working just 40 hours a week isn't the norm in China. Working beyond that is far more common. Additionally, many average Americans have shared their actual earnings and work hours on Xiaohongshu. One plumber mentioned working 40 hours a week and earning $1,200 weekly. An architect reported earning $11,000 per month before taxes, and a software engineer claimed a pre-tax monthly income $20K. One user even shared a hospital bill for a bone fracture, showing that the cost was just over $4,000, roughly similar to the cost of medical procedures in China. These examples highlight how information is selectively filtered within China's digital space, shaping public perception. This ensures that the critical narratives about the US are emphasized, while contradictory facts remain hidden or less visible. But can everyone see the content in this China-US comparison, especially the divisive remarks? Clearly not. Some of it has been throttled and the other content has been completely banned. The examples I mentioned earlier actually came from a Zhihu user who compiled screenshots of these claims. This person created a less than positive China-US comparison, and shortly after, the post was removed. Some prominent Weibo influencers also tried to debunk parts of the comparison, only to have their accounts banned. Content that could disrupt unity is swiftly suppressed, and this was a clear demonstration in the context of this comparison. When we look at this so-called China-US comparison, it's really an unfair competition. First, any content unfavorable to the narrative is deleted or restricted. Then, a small group of Americans with lower living standards is chosen. Their circumstances are exaggerated and they are compared to wealthier Chinese people. Throughout the process, the other side isn't allowed to refute the claims or provide their side of the story. With this kind of approach, I could easily compare North Korea to Switzerland and make North Korea look better. If I used the life of North Korea's leader and compared it to the life of a homeless person in Switzerland, I could certainly make North Korea seem superior, especially if I were allowed to control the narratives and prevent the other side from responding or debunking the comparison. How could I not win in such a one-sided situation? We often hear about algorithms creating information bubbles, but in China, it doesn't even take algorithm. All it requires is the Chinese Communist Party's set of tactics to naturally push people into echo chambers. The key difference with this particular China-U.S. comparison is that while the government is still guiding the narrative, this time there is also significant public involvement. Many individuals have actively participated in spreading and engaging with this comparison. I refer to these actively engaging in this China-U.S. comparison as the triumphalist individuals. Behind their participation, I see a lack of national confidence and a desperate desire to claim victory. There has been a noticeable shift in China's online discourse. Before 2012, the internet in China was relatively open with fewer restrictions, and it reflected the true state of society. This environment allowed the voices critical of the government and intellectuals questioning the system to dominate. Triumphalist individuals had little opportunity to assert themselves. However, after Xi Jinping took power in 2012 and started cracking down on the internet, the triumphalist individuals began to thrive. The narrative shifted in their favor. At first, they celebrated what they called the new four great inventions: high-speed rail, Alipay, bike sharing, and e-commerce. When this narrative lost steam, they began comparing China to former world powers and casting the U.S. as a backward empire. This was followed by campaigns to assert China's strength on a global stage. These triumphalist individuals managed to maintain their influence until the pandemic hit. As China's economy faltered with rising unemployment, joblessness among young people, deflation, and declining incomes, their grip began to weaken. China's decline has not only impacted people's living standards, but also their mindset. The pride and the mentality of always winning began to erode as the economy stagnated. Yet these triumphalist individuals have become so addicted to the notion of victory that it has become their mental crutch. How could they let go of it so easily? In this period of adversity, they continue to dream of winning once more. And this latest China-U.S. comparison provided them with a glimmer of hope. But was this truly about seeking the truth or understanding America? Of course not. If they were genuinely looking for the truth, they could have easily researched the data across the various websites and the social media platforms. What they were truly seeking was an opportunity to prove that they were right. But engaging in a confrontation with Americans on Twitter or Facebook will never give them the opportunity to win. As we all know, in an environment of free speech without the CCP's protection, the lies of these triumphalist individuals would crumble easily. In a truly free speech environment, the truth is self-evident. In such a scenario, during the so-called China-U.S. comparison, these individuals would have no chance of winning. Just like if China were to allow free speech, intellectuals and critics would naturally overcome these triumphalist individuals. For them to win, they need the protection of the CCP. When Americans began flooding into platforms like Xiaohongshu, these triumphalist individuals seized the opportunity to reclaim a sense of victory. The arrival of Americans on Chinese social media gave them shelter. They were able to exploit China's censorship and information blockade, creating the illusion of victory. In the end, they succeeded in achieving this. Following the influx of Americans into Xiaohongshu, these individuals created the so-called China versus US comparison, giving them the long-missing satisfaction of feeling victorious. However, even with CCP's help, these triumphalist individuals couldn't achieve the same overwhelming success as before. They couldn't draw the conclusion that China is far superior to the US to soothe themselves. Still, this was not entirely without value. At least, with the CCP's assistance, they could convince themselves that while they may be struggling, Americans are not faring much better, providing them with a sense of balance. These people have effectively trapped themselves in an information bubble, either seeking it out or even create one when none existed. They can only find the peace and the solace within this self-made echo chamber. But as we all know, this psychological comfort is nothing more than self-deception. It does nothing to change the harsh reality that many people in China are facing. Such self-consolation will only lead to more hardship in the future. Comparing suffering and avoiding the real issues will only worsen the situation. The only way to change things is through deep reflection, confronting the problems directly and identifying their root causes. Thank you so much for watching. If you find this video helpful, please like it, drop a comment below, and hit the subscribe button right here. It really helps YouTube suggest my video to others. I'll be back with more content soon. Until then, be well.